Okay, welcome everybody to, we have tonight a joint meeting with the planning board. Today is Tuesday, January 15th, 2019. And we're going to discuss Chapel Crossing. And we can start off with, do you want to say anything about it?
I'm okay. Thank you.
I think it would be appropriate if we start with the applicant just giving us an update as to what's transpired since we last met and they received the approvals, and an update with respect to what their current request is. Now that Whole Foods is open, now they have an additional request of the two boards.
Okey-dokes.
Good evening, Mr. Supervisor, members of the board. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Mark Weingarten. I'm a partner in the law firm of Del Bello, Dinellen, Weingarten, Wise, and Wiedeker, and I am pleased to represent this evening SGP USPFV, Chappaqua Retail Owner LLC, in connection with the, in connection with the project known as Chappaqua Crossing, the retail component, located at 480 Bedford Road and 152135 and 57 Roaring Brook Road, Newcastle, New York. I'm joined tonight by Felix Charney, who's well known to all of you. We also have with us tonight some of the people from Lifetime Fitness, so you can hear from them later if you have particular questions with respect to that, specifically Ben Alberts, their development manager. Since we last met you, has everyone had a chance to go visit Whole Foods? See, this is our whole idea. You were going to go to Whole Foods, and then you're going to need to go to a gym, and we were going to come back, and you were going to want to go to Lifetime Fitness. So this was our plan from the start. So, in all seriousness, this hearing is a follow-up, or this meeting is a follow-up to our December request to defer certain approval conditions which came out of the original approvals for Chappaqua Crossing. We asked at that time that we be given permission for TCOs for what we called at that point Phase 1, which would be Whole Foods and Chase Bank, and to open them. And you, as the two boards, came together and decided on a number of temporary conditions that had to be imposed in order for those TCOs to be permitted to go forward before certain permanent approvals were able to be finished. And as you know, and I won't bore you with it this evening, we went through a long discussion of the reason as to why those permanent conditions were not done yet, and that we do still expect to be on time with having those done in the June timeframe as far as going forward. The difference is that we're here before you this evening, and now that Whole Foods and Chase Bank are over, those temporary conditions that you asked us to implement have in fact been implemented. I believe that your professionals have had an opportunity to observe those, your professionals in your police department who have done amazing work throughout the holidays and going forward with respect to the traffic issues, have had an opportunity to observe them. So we are now here for what we considered to be Phase 2 when we spoke to you, and that's how we broke down. And you have a traffic study in front of you for our Phase 2, which is up to 100,000 feet of retail beyond the Whole Foods, the Chase Bank, and now would be a total of 100,000 feet of retail, which is the Lifetime Fitness and the Pet Value, Fidelity Investments, which we expect to be more in the March timeframe, and there's about 17,000 feet beyond that.
Pardon me 1 second. We had email that, and I don't have a hard copy.
The SG's application.
I can bring my computer, but I don't have the hard copy.
We don't have an analysis that shows 100,000 square feet. We have an analysis that shows the full.
Correct.
It shows the full
Correct.
square footage, which is the same version that we reviewed back in December, but there isn't one that's specific to 100,000.
That is correct. We actually gave you a traffic study for more than what we're asking for the approval on, correct? And we're relying on that information. So, at this point, we're asking for that. We'll remember that there are certain conditions there, such as no more than 50% of the office can be built while this temporary period would be going on. The townhomes will not be built while this temporary period is going on, et cetera. All that's calculated into the traffic, and we think it's reasonable to be making this request at this time. So that's the general introduction, and if you have any specific questions, we have our professionals here. We're happy to answer.
Just a quick housekeeping question. Do we have the amended application for the revised application for the TCO up to 100,000? Because I think initially it came through at a lower amount.
It was, and then we gave you a letter, to be specific. We gave you a letter, which we then amended a few days later, because what it came out to was while the traffic study, which was really the basis of it, was finished and was for the full amount, we asked for the two, but it became apparent that the Fidelity investments would be coming only a month later. We'd have to be coming back to you only a few
Right.
weeks later, and then there was only another 17,000 feet. So we're making the full request. So we decided to, so we gave you an amended letter saying we'd like it to be for the full 100,000 feet.
So
But.
maybe you could outline again exactly the stores and the places that you anticipate opening between now and, say, June, so we have an update on that.
Yes, Felix Charney, I don't know the name of that partnership, so I'll just be Chuck Crossing. So to what Mark said, originally, when he sent the revised letter, and we were talking about just Lifetime Fitness and Pet Value, but then we quickly figured out that like a month later, we'd be back with this and a few others. So at the moment, we have Fidelity signed in Northern Westchester's Wellness Center. Basically, that finishes Building B. Building B is everything looking at the Whole Foods store to the right. And now we're filling up Building D, which is the small stores, and Building E. So we, based on those are actually the signed leases, but there are a number of other leases that are pending. But based on this agreement, Whole Foods and Lifetime Fitness are 80,000 feet. I'm rounding these other numbers. Chase is 3, Pet Value is 3, so that's 86. So it leaves us about 14,000 square feet. Based on the additional leases between Fidelity and Northern Westchester, I think Fidelity's 5, Northern Westchester's 2, so that's 7. So there's about another 7,000 square feet. Based on where our leases are and our build-out plans, we think that that's enough, so we don't have to come back and bother you again. And based on when the paving plants are open, we actually think we will be at a place where we'll be talking about a CO kind of in the April, early May part. I know Mark said something about June, but our construction's pretty much online, assuming we don't have a late winter, that we should be able to be at a CO place where we're no longer having this conversation about opening stores, and we're dealing with Bill and the rest of that process.
Okay, great, thank you.
And again, that's our presentation. Our professionals, Andy Tung is here, as is John Collins, and if you have any specific questions, we're happy to try and answer them.
Okay. Maybe we should get some information from Lou.
Yep.
Lou Lugio, going with Sam Schwartz Consulting. So,
Always a grand entrance, Lou.
you like that? I come in with belts and whistles. We wanted to prepare a memo for tonight for the boards, but in light of the fact that we had an additional set of analyses to perform, sorry, my back is to you. We will finish that memo tomorrow. We have a presentation that'll go through a series of steps and some other information that the boards may find interesting as well. So with that, I think it might be best just to get into this presentation, and I will email this out tomorrow morning so it's part of the record as well. So as you may recall, what we have done is we looked at the 4 intersections that you see up on the screen. Going, I guess, north is up, but basically 117 is over to the right with two intersections. The top right circle is one of the entrance locations to the site. The one below that is Route 117 and Roaring Brook Road. The one to the left of that is Roaring Brook Road site access and the high school to the south. And then the other access point near the railroad tracks. And so what we have done is to do traffic counts of these locations to really capture what the pre and post Whole Foods effect is as far as the number of vehicles generated to the site itself. And so if you remember, Whole Foods obviously opened up on the 15th. We did a pre-count on the 13th, and then a post-count on the 18th. So there were 2 weekdays, and we did not have enough time to do a pre-Saturday count for the Whole Foods before it opened, and so this was the information that we had. So what we found out about the actual Whole Foods is based on the counts that were performed for the 4 different peak hours, and from what we had in Mazur's trip generation estimates in their studies, and you can see on the screen, in the AM peak hour of the school, 44 were the number of vehicles that were going to and from the site at the 4 different location points, or really the 3 different access points. So that was a net change of 23. 63 is the actual count versus 42. 124 in the school peak versus 112, and 139 versus 127.
Can you explain again why there was such a discrepancy,
yeah.
especially with the AM?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is we knew that since it would be a brand-new site, people would come at least for the first week, maybe even up to a month. We would have additional traffic that what would be above and beyond what we as traffic engineers would estimate that value to be. Second, it was in the middle of December, towards the end of December, a high peak time for shoppers, so that's another addition to it. And specifically in the AM peak hour, there were a number of contractors and other people that were on the site coming in and out. And so all of that contributes to slightly higher volumes compared to what was estimated in the Mazur report. I think that these numbers over the next 2 or 3 months would probably end up somewhere between the two here for this specifically the Whole Foods. And so I wanted the board to have that information just to understand, what actually happened in that pre and post. If there are any questions on that, we can come back to that. And if you have actually, we can talk about it now if you had
Well, I
questions
thought the
now.
percentages were actually fairly substantial, not just similar, but you've explained, I think, some of
Yeah.
those, some of the reasons behind it. So at least I'm satisfied in hearing those kinds of descriptions and understanding better.
Okay. So the other thing is that we have had an automatic traffic recorder, which is the tubes across the roadway that are counting traffic data on a 15-minute basis from very early in December through now. We still have them down, and our plan is to keep them down until at least the middle of February, and it might even go beyond that. And so we have one that was down first, which is on Route 17 in both the northbound and southbound directions. And then we added another one maybe a week or two after the one on 117 went down on Roaring Brook Road. So what I thought I would share with you tonight is the before and after of basically before and after Whole Foods opening. And so the blue represents, at the bottom, you can see that it's time of day going from midnight on the left until 11:30 or midnight on the right. And the blue indicates the before count data, and I think the peak of the blue might be 140 vehicles, and this is just in the northbound direction. And the after is that dashed red line. And so there are a couple of things that I take away from this anyway, and one is, again, it is the middle towards the end of December and even in the beginning of January, and so some of these volumes may have been affected by, the school was definitely in session in the after condition, but some of the volumes may have been affected by other vacations, other different types of travel patterns. It's not significantly different than before and after. It's just a question of the time of day that's
School
kind
in
of shifted.
session in the before ones?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So in other words, the before ones sort of reflect the old pattern.
That's
and
right.
The new one, to a certain extent, is probably underestimating the after ones because you had the non-school conditions when they were on vacation. Because I was.
They were in session both.
They were in session in both,
What's
yes.
the date frame that this represents?
I think it's the same date of the 13th and the 18th.
It's just 2 days.
We have a lot of data, but we wanted to pull out apples and apples here in looking back at the count data and what the traffic volume data was on the same day. So our next step, and we put a lot of this together today, so over the course of the day tomorrow and what would be in the memo might be additional information as far as this is just northbound, right? So there's also a southbound and there's also a Roaring Brook Road in both directions.
But will you be able to do an analysis that shows all of the days, so the average across all of the data that you've collected after the opening?
Yes.
As opposed to the 2 points in time?
Yes. And we have data for when the school was not in session. So I'd like to get some more information together so that we have a little bit clearer picture as to, why this was not predictable based on what I thought the data would look like.
Let me just ask you a quick question, just to understand this. You said it takes the data for every 15 minutes?
Yes.
So if cars are stuck in traffic and therefore not moving, would that indicate that there are lower numbers than
Yes,
what there may actually be?
that is correct.
Okay, well then that makes a little more sense to me because I know that northbound gets really backed up at certain times of day. So it feels like between the 4 and 6:30, those numbers seem really low to me. But if it means that cars aren't moving, that they were just sitting there, then that might make a little more sense.
Right, so think about it as, a place on the road, like that tube on the road, and you're really counting the number of vehicles that are going past you. So let's just say in a 5-minute period, if there's really no traffic congestion, there might be 100, let's just say. But if there is a lot of traffic and congestion, it might only be 25. So there is a reason why, and we have actual video that the actual turning movement counts at the intersections were done on. We have not cross-checked that. But most likely, part of the reason for lower traffic volume is congestion. The other part may be there's lower traffic volume. So I don't know the reason yet for that.
Yeah, you raise an interesting point about other outside influences. As I recollect, prior to the 13th, there was a lot of construction going on, and the backups were really serious when the construction was going on. But once the construction basically stopped, the whole thing flowed much more easily. And, I went out at 5:15 today and went through there and went right up to the light. And usually in the past, the bad time is 4:45. And so there's still residual at 5:15, but not tonight. So it's,
Lou, do you have any data with regard to length of cycles at the peaks? I mean, I don't know how you would do that with the tube, and maybe just video, or
No, the
or just
video,
the police.
we could get that. I think for the most part, people did not sit through multiple cycles of the signal. It did happen on occasion, and Lieutenant could probably talk to that because him and his officers are out there all the time. I think it happens sometimes. It doesn't happen all the time.
We increased that 4 seconds, am I mistaken? Did
We have increased it once, but we were going to make another change, and that has not happened yet. Both the traffic signal timing changes at 117 and at the, at the new signal at Roaring Brook has not happened yet, and that's because we have not been able to get the cabinet open and someone to actually make the
Who's
changes.
responsible for that?
We actually didn't get DOT approval until today
Yeah.
to do that, to do the 117. And we have a conference call tomorrow at 9:30 about Roaring Brook.
Yep.
The guy was on vacation, somebody was on vacation, right?
That was Roaring Brook, yeah.
Not either one of our traffic consultants. I forgot who it was, somebody.
they were home at.
And that happens sometimes. It definitely happens.
I mean, not that it's worth a whole lot, but anecdotally, I go back and forth this intersection all the time. The 117 flow has been as good as I've seen it in decades.
Yeah, no, everybody,
agree.
I mean,
It's been very impressive, actually,
yeah, everybody's been, we believe me, we would
Should
hear
have
the,
more
we would hear the
Whole Foods here.
complaints,
earlier.
and we have not. There's plenty of people anxious to complain, and they have not been able to.
I understand it's the safest intersection in the Western Hemisphere.
That's what I've heard.
Most expensive.
Most expensive.
Southbound, again on 117, southbound, and this ATR is south of the intersection with Roaring Brook Road. So in that north direction and south direction, the ATR is on the south side of the intersection with Roaring Brook. And this, this one pretty much matches up well both before and after, with a little bit more traffic in that lunchtime at 10 a.m. To 12 p.m. time period. This one didn't really say much to us in terms of southbound movement. Roaring Brook Road also, again, from a before and after, it is pretty consistent, and you can see again that 2:30 to 3 o'clock, the before has a lot more volume compared to the after. And this is in the eastbound direction. This is going towards 117. And the last one is in the westbound direction. Again, I think part of this is really two things in both directions. One is the actual traffic signal itself, and what it does to change traffic patterns and motorist behavior. But also, there is probably a sense of additional volume that was going along Roaring Brook Road. So you can handle additional volume with changes in traffic signal timing if everything is working well. Then, as some have said, traffic conditions seem to be working well. And that's something that, again, from the lieutenant's perspective and also ours, we didn't see any major issues as far as traffic congestion was concerned, or incidents as far as that's concerned also. So with respect to recommendations, we talked about increase in Roaring Brook Road in the westbound left turn phase at the high school. So this is the left that's going from Roaring Brook Road into the high school, extending this phase going into the high school by 5 seconds, from 10 seconds to 15 seconds during all the time periods, and especially in the AM peak hour. And I did see that officers were allowing and waving on this left turn into the high school during those time periods. And so the signal itself, and we had talked about the differences in having different timing and phasing plans for traffic signal. And for this specific one, the new signal, there are detectors at every one of the intersection approaches in every lane. And so the signal itself is what we refer to as actuated, meaning that if there's a presence of vehicles that are there, then the traffic signal will allow time for it. If there's no presence, that no vehicles are waiting, then it'll skip that or allow just a minimal amount of time. And so when we talk about additional 5 seconds, this is to allow for the maximum amount of time to be extended by 5 seconds. And the same thing with the northbound right turn. So what we were talking about, and this is going to be part of our call tomorrow morning also, is that it seems that this, and in the very beginning, and Lieutenant will probably talk to you, there was some pavement markings and lane utilization markings that were not correct, and that has been fixed. But what happens in the case of the northbound coming out of the high school, when this approach is going, this is an exclusive right turn, green arrow, and people can come out and make this right turn. At the end of this phase, this will go, yellow, and then you'll see a red arrow. If there's no one, especially in the AM peak hour, if there's no one coming out of the site, then this whole phase will get skipped. And then the next phase is the left turn coming into the site, into the high school. But what happens is that if you're a motorist traveling in the northbound direction, you'll see a yellow and then a red arrow, and then it'll be red for a second or two, and then it'll turn green, because we do allow right turns coming out while the left turn is going in. There's no conflict.
Lieutenant, have you noticed anyone making a right on a red arrow out of that location?
I haven't received any complaints about it. I haven't noticed it myself.
So what we did witness occasionally is that, people will come to the intersection, see it go to red, and then stop, but then it goes right to green. So I don't want that hesitation, and that's something we'll talk about tomorrow morning on the conference call, and I think that could be addressed. And then repainting of all of the markings through the intersection. I'm not sure if that was done yet, but that's something that both of us said that should be done with an epoxy paint. I'm stealing his thunder here. An epoxy paint that will last a lot longer and be more reflective. Yeah.
Yeah, all the intersections have
looks
been,
good.
all the intersections have been
Start on
repainted.
the 9th.
Okay.
Yes, they have been repainted.
Yeah.
I got a cheat sheet here with all those answers.
I got them too, Joe.
You got the same, all right, then you answer, you're more credible than me.
At the intersection of 117 and Roaring Brook, what we'd like to do, we did see that there was there's definitely a lot more left turn volume coming from Roaring Brook going northbound, as opposed to right turn volume going southbound. And so we wanted to increase the eastbound approach a little bit in terms of timing, but also increase the northbound approach also to allow for that lead phase before vehicles that are coming in the southbound direction. We also took away the no right turn on red signs for the exclusive right turn. And again, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that the purpose that I wanted to put these no right turn on red was so that if the if the northbound and southbound both had red and people were coming out of Roaring Brook, people coming southbound on red could, make the right turn and continue. And so what I didn't want to happen was that this flow would continue, and then when northbound had the green, these right turners were still going and didn't allow the northbound to go. I don't think that's the case. I think it does happen often. I don't think it's that significant. I don't know if the lieutenant wants to weigh in on that at all.
We didn't see it as an issue.
Okay.
We recommended the no turn on reds be removed.
And so the no turn on red signs were removed. And again, the focus of tomorrow's call is to talk about the slight changes in signal timing at this intersection as well.
Do we have that situation because we think that the left-hand turn folks and the right-hand turn folks are using basically two lanes, even though it's not really marked out that way for Roaring
Yeah,
Brook?
it's almost they merge and then stagger.
Right.
So I think, they're working it out.
Okay.
And also who takes control of that, like, the left turn people are gonna just take control of
They're moving, the other one is supposed to,
right, and they will.
Supposed to stop.
They're gonna take control of it, they're gonna be like, we got the arrow.
they are
Yeah.
supposed to stop.
Usually it's the path that's shorter that wins, and so that's just the way it is.
So the right turn would win.
Yeah. Most of the
Not in
time.
this town.
It's the aggressive
We
person.
got the arrow.
I think it's just
We got the arrow.
the larger SUV.
The arrow wins.
I put this in here just to coordinate. We have been coordinating with the lieutenant on this, and he prepares a weekly report. And there really hasn't been any major issues that we could speak of, but I'll let you
Yeah,
talk.
there hasn't. There was one accident at the intersection in the southbound through lane. It was a rear-end accident, and the woman admitted that she reached down on the passenger seat to grab something and didn't see the car in front of her. So it wasn't related to the intersection itself.
Just thinking of putting that on the traffic sign.
Don't reach.
reach.
The only, the only issues we really have is still that, northbound, left turn from 117 to westbound. But we're hoping that the increased lead time is going to help that. And morning, early arrival, when it's not late arrival at the school, there's an issue with the left-bound turn going into, westbound into the school. That's backing up to 117. Again, we're hoping that the 5-second lead there will take care of that. Officers are going out and clearing that for arrival, so it's working okay. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, for people who don't have kids in high school, the high school kids arrive at different times. They have late-ins and sleep-ins, and so they
Yep.
don't all arrive at the same time sometimes. Sometimes the whole grade comes like one period later.
Yeah, yesterday was a late arrival, and there was no issues with the left turn. Today, there were issues because of the normal arrival. When the light was still, when first activated and people were exiting the school, the arrows were painted incorrectly. The right turn arrow was showing a through and right turn. So people were sitting in that right turn lane, waiting for, wanting to go straight and waiting for the traffic light to clear or turn. It wasn't happening because, was it the accentuator?
Actually.
Actuator, on the left lane wasn't being actuated.
Yep.
So they're
You
sitting,
good.
yeah, thanks. So they're sitting there and there's nothing to make the light cycle. Once we figured out it was painted improperly and we corrected that, I haven't had any complaints about people leaving the school. So overall, the plan is performing well.
All right, so our next steps were the following, right? Implement the new signal timing plan, and we're hopeful that could actually happen by the 18th. It's possible, right? Yeah. Continue the ATR counts along 117 and Roaring Brook, and looking at the data, and again, through the middle of February. We, at this point, when this was prepared, we were looking at doing a trip generation of the Lifetime Fitness and the pet value independently, in the sense that we're going to look at what the number of trips were going to be for each one of them, and then do a traffic analysis for all 4 peak hours based on this incremental approach. Again, the memo that I had talked about originally was going to be done today for you tonight, and that will be done for tomorrow. And a lot of this information in terms of the actual detail and tables will be in the memo, and then it could also be presented next week at the Tuesday meeting.
It's actually
if-
22nd,
It's 22nd, that's right, that's changed.
sorry.
That should be the
We
22nd.
changed it back to Tuesday.
So, one thing that we had on here before was that if in fact the boards approve of the Lifetime Fitness and pet value, what we would want to do, similar to what was done with the Whole Foods, is conduct traffic counts before and after to get a sense of what that trip generation was for those two. So, the next set of graphics, all of this is graphical only because there's a lot of data here, and the tables are not done yet, but will be in that memo tomorrow. So the series of slides that are here look at all 4 of the peak hours, and we start with the Whole Foods and Chase Bank post-opening without improvements. And when I talk about improvements, they're just the signal timing improvements that we had mentioned before. And so what we tried to do is to give you kind of an abbreviated version of levels of service that graphically you could see what the queue lengths are based on the length of the arrows, and the color as far as the legend of levels of service. And more detailed information, we'll have more detail, obviously.
The thicker arrows have more volume than thinner arrows?
So not necessarily, it's really the length of the arrow and not the width of the arrow. And we'll make those corrections also. I think this was just a function of trying to get all the arrows on the graphics. So the length is important, the width is not important. And obviously the color is important. So, I mean, just in the, again, post-opening, without improvements, looking at Roaring Brook Road, making this left turn out. As I said, this is a high number of vehicles that are doing this in the AM school peak. All the others, weren't as bad, but then we go to the school peak with the improvements. If we implemented, again, additional timing in this direction, then that goes to green, and everything else really is green as far as the AM peak hour with the signal timing improvements. When we get to the highway peak hour, this actually gets a lot worse in terms of the queue length and the level of service. With the signal changes, we really get back to a green and overall intersection level service that's acceptable. When we get to, oh, sorry, you had a question? You want to go back or no?
I'm sort of going forward,
Okay,
so I'll wait.
you want to go forward, okay.
I don't want to.
So, all of this was, Whole Foods and Chase, post-opening with improvements, again, AM peak hour. And this is without improvements for the school peak. And, this eastbound Roaring Brook Road left turn, again, is always going to be, more of an issue than the right turn just based on volume. With the improvements in signal timing, it gets better in the school peak. In the PM peak hour, obviously it becomes an issue, but with signal timing changes, it's not. So that's with the Whole Foods, with the Chase Bank, and that's really these volumes and analysis. This analysis is based on the actual data, traffic counts that was collected both pre and post, right? So it's based on real data.
And Lou, this includes existing traffic on the people who live in the neighborhood?
Yes.
The housing that's in the project now that's built out, the people coming to office? All those numbers are baked into this, or is this just Whole Foods and the bank?
No, this is everything.
Okay.
Everything that's, open today, those volumes, all the volumes are in there. So the way to isolate what was
Is that snapshot, to Greg's point, is that snapshot just for those 2 days that we're looking at? Or is this now including the wider spread of days, based on your count? Earlier, we talked about those 2 days.
Yeah, those counts were just those 2 days.
Just those 2 days, one day before and one day after. I think it was 13th and the 18th of
That's right,
December?
that's right. And so again, the before and after, the before count assumed whoever was going into the site was, going into the site. It's really the incremental difference of those 2
Maybe it's just
days.
too insufficient to, such a short
Well,
period
he's
of
got
time?
other data, he's
So,
analyzing, I think.
so the short answer is no, it's not insufficient, given that we have a tremendous amount of other data that Mazer collected in the past, looking at historical data as well. And typically, from a traffic analysis standpoint, obviously, whoever's doing an analysis can't be there 365 days. So we normally go out and we collect that ATR data for a week. Normally, we collect 2 Saturdays, 2 Sundays, and then use Tuesday through Wednesday. Fridays and Mondays are usually not normal, so we throw that data out. So it's normally either a 1 or 2 day sample anyway. For the intersection of Roaring Brook, the new signal, it really has a lot to do with it being a smart signal and can adjust traffic times accordingly. But with the intersection of 117, it is a fixed time period and phasing that's there. Now, in the future, with the new signal and the new northbound exclusive left turn lane, then that signal would be similar to the new signal at Roaring Brook and really would work a lot better. But the short answer is, it is based on 2 days, the before and after. I really didn't see the traffic volume as far as the turning movement counts change that much, even though we did see some discrepancy before and after, just on the straight line of Route 17, Route 117 going northbound
And
and southbound.
again, these are assuming that if somebody's sitting in traffic, it's not getting counted?
If you're sitting in traffic, you are getting counted. So again, it goes back to if the higher the speed, right, if you're going through the intersection, you can get more volume in and you'll count that. The lower the speed, then the lower the count is going to be. So as you get to a point where you have more and more congestion, then more vehicles may miss that cycle of the northbound approach. Then you're going to be counting less traffic because less traffic is getting through.
Right, so isn't that kind of counterintuitive? Don't you need somebody to, I don't know, I just,
Well,
driving there
Yeah.
many, many times every day, I just don't see all that green, at least from before. It's been okay now, but I mean, in morning rush to the high school, it's still, and this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Whole Foods, but I watch people have to wait like 4 lights before they can get through. So
And is that-
maybe that's still green, that's level of service C, I don't know, but.
Is that, the question I have, is that now with the MPT plan and 117 in effect or previous to this?
Yeah, I'm not even talking so much on 117, I'm
Okay.
talking more at Roaring Brook Road.
Got it.
Well, it got worse also because now they're checking IDs for every car that comes in. So that's created a problem.
Into the high school?
Yes.
And that's a separate conversation that I think I need to have because
even before that.
we need to have that happen further into the site.
Right, I told them about that.
Okay.
I don't know if I did anything, but I did tell them.
But even before that, I mean, the reason people are cutting through the Chappaqua Crossing development to come out over there is because they're waiting so long to make that left turn into the high school.
Lou, this is when you change the timing?
That's going to be
Yes.
recent.
So when the timing on the light is changed,
Yeah. So if we,
then you'll get better service. See, there it is now, where it's D or E. That's current without improvements, if I understand correctly.
yes.
And now the next one you're gonna go to, you're gonna change some of the timing, and then it gets green.
Yeah, but I was not even talking about over there. I
Oh.
was talking about at that intersection.
That intersection, well, that gets
Yeah.
better too.
Yeah, but the green arrows that are currently green, I don't
So-
know. I
Oh, you don't
think they
believe,
should be
oh, you
green.
But
don't
I
think so.
feel like
got
maybe
you.
we
Okay.
need to push forward because we have
Yep.
in front of us.
But
a
this is
proposal
also
understand.
5 to 6 PM.
Allow
That was
for-
5 to 6
Yeah,
PM.
yeah.
Well, yeah.
I just have one other question. If you've got the counter south of the 117 intersection as you head south, are you underestimating the southbound count if they're peeling off, making a right on Roaring Brook, or peeling off and cutting through Chappaqua Crossing?
Yes, you won't have that volume, right? The ATR is about here, actually, somewhere here. So it's only capturing vehicles that are continuing south or making the right turn out of Roaring Brook Road. And again, the purpose of the ATR is really to get time of day. What's happening, when are the peaks occurring? And the turning movement counts are really to get a focus on what are the actual movements, what are the demands at the intersection.
Lou, going forward, you know, I know you've got some studies, and Dr. Collins has got some studies also for Phase 2. But it seems to me what we don't have, and perhaps we should get before we take action on this, is Phase 2A, what I'll call 2A. And that is the construction of the Lewis Wall, all that excavation, the drainage, the repaving, the expansion of the lanes. We're going to have, it seems to me, we need to get information from the applicant in terms of what that construction timeframe looks like, what it's going to be, what the interruption is going to be, because these are wonderful numbers when, as we currently have with the MPT, which again, I think is flowing terrifically. But we know we're heading to another wall, wrong term, another situation. You know, that we need to understand, because we're going to be looking at that, and that's going to be part of this. February 18th is when the 60-day moratorium on construction ends. I don't know if they can start right away, given the weather, but we need to understand that. It seems to me that's very, very important to understand what's going to happen during that phase and what the length of that phase is.
Right.
And
These
asphalt
numbers are
plants-
frankly relatively useless to us for that Phase 2A.
Before, I'm sorry, Lou, before we move on, forgive me for coming in late, so if I miss this, I apologize, but I want to go back to Lisa's experience, because just help me out here. Either I'm promoting a myth or there's something we're missing. There is such a thing as a double peak, and which is within a 1 hour time period, there could be a surge of traffic, which is, for instance, students trying to get to the Morning Bell, and they are all sort of coming in a more compressed period of time within that 1 hour, and that's when you get, potentially, I think, that's when you get the kind of delays that you're seeing at these intersections in the morning and sometimes in the evening when people are leaving. Even at a work peak, a 1 hour, a work trip peak, people leaving an office building, they all leave at 5:30, or most of them cluster around, for example, 5:30. So there is more traffic in the 5:15 to 5:35 period of time in the PM of 5 to 6 than there is in the aggregate averaged out. So if I'm right about the way these numbers are gathered, I assume there's a tape in the road, or maybe there's another device that you guys use these days, but it actually does the counts for you. And that's measured against a time period. There's a clock, and then there's the day that's gathered. So within, for example, that 5 to 6 time period, when you look at that data, I'd be surprised if the trips across that tape were evenly distributed throughout the 60 minutes. They must be clustered. I'm guessing that they are clustered in a peak within the peak.
Yes, I wanted to show you, I think you didn't have, we have ATR, we had the ATR data that was here, and I'll go to that right now. I don't know if did that actually get turned off, the TV? I swear I didn't do it. Problem.
Here it is. Something's,
I guess it got turned
Did
off.
something?
it's got a pulse.
Coming on.
So-
Coming on.
As it comes on, you're correct in the sense that there can be and sometimes there is a peak within the peak. So all traffic analysis is done based on a 60-minute period, but that 60-minute, 1 hour period is based on 4 15-minute periods. And so when we collect the data, and this ATR data will show you as well, it takes into account if the traffic volume is not uniform. So if the traffic volume, let's go there. So you can see this is actually, I think this is actually every half hour, but there are data points for every one of these 15-minute periods. So in essence, when one, in that 5 to 6 peak hour, 5 to 6 p.m., if there is one 15-minute period that is very different than the other three, there's a factor that is utilized in looking at how that intersection works. And so, yes, on average, when we go back and we look at, this might be green at a certain point, it is looking at what's happening over the 60-minute period. And it's not specifically focused on what's happening in a 15-minute period. It's not something that we do from an analysis standpoint, but obviously it is real, and it would be hard to give you an analysis just based on the 15 minutes. But we certainly could try, and we've tried to do that with how far back the queue goes, and the amount of time that people have to wait.
So, and you're the expert, I'm not, but I've done projects where traffic is important. In fact, almost every project of any size, traffic is the number one concern. And I've done for event venues, for example, for train stations, for example, downtowns where there are, and suburban locations where there are people rushing for the 5:56 train, for example. And I am familiar with peak traffic analysis. I've seen them before. And I've worked with Sam Swartz myself many years ago, so I don't want to doubt your expertise. But I am familiar with those counts, and there are times when they actually aren't necessary in order to, or desired, in order to be sure that one understands what the real impacts are. And the real impacts, I think, are what people are actually experiencing on the roads. And the real impact is, I'm not faulting your data, but the real impact of the people on the road is not a graph or a bunch of arrows on a screen. And I think the real impacts that Lisa has been experiencing have been the comments we've been getting in this room from people. When we were doing the original EIS, and we weren't responsible for it, the town board was, but we worked on it, on the whole thing together. They'd come in and they'd tell us these stories about, gee, you guys, you just don't know what's going on out there. And my suspicion is that it's not a big block of time, right? It's not an hour of people waiting at level of service F. But when they're on the road trying to get through that intersection every day, they are experiencing that level of service, and it's important to them, so I think it should be important to us.
Yeah, if I'm building on it, if the light cycle is 1 minute and this peak is 10 minutes, then you're there for 10 minutes potentially, or as Lisa said, at least 4 cycles. And so
So
that's.
I'm not saying
huge.
that, again, I'm not saying that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so my point is there a way to manage the timing on the lights to get down to that fine grain?
No. Basically, you can't, only because, especially the new signal is fully actuated. It basically gives the amount of time based on the demand. So it might change even in that 15-minute period where there's a heavy demand, it will give more green time. So that,
is it automatic?
that is automatic, yes.
I see. You
At
said
the,
that. I missed
at the new signal or the new controller at 117, that would also be the same case, where it's not right now, but it would be in the future. When we're dealing with, again, a school peak is a very similar example where it is a 15 or maybe even a 30-minute peak within that peak hour. But again, what we do from a traffic analysis standpoint is to look at how it's going to operate on an average condition. There are peaks within the peak hour, but we would not be able to design this signal to allow for great operation for just a 15-minute period. Because this intersection may have one additional lane in every one of the directions if we were just going to analyze it for the worst possible 15 minutes of a 24-hour day. And you know, the similarity would be, we're not going to have 5 lanes of traffic on the highway if for most of the time, 2 lanes would satisfy it.
No, I understand you don't design for the worst condition because that's over-design. And one just needs to sort of manage through that particular circumstance. And if it's a daily circumstance, it's really unfortunate. But I'm guessing that you're saying it just needs to be something that one prudently, from a traffic point of view, traffic design point of view, one just needs to live with. And I just want to hear that I'd hate to leave this subject and leave this room again tonight without some official recognition that what these people are living through is actually true, rather than it just being something that is sort of glossed over. Because unless we address it and agree that it's happening, I don't know what we say to people who come in the next time.
I'm not sure really what, the benefit of tonight versus last month is that last month we had, fear was very high. We didn't know what to expect. And we all expected the worst. And then Whole Foods opened, and it actually didn't materialize.
Right.
So we actually now have the benefit of not just these studies and numbers and, times and all this other stuff. We actually have real-life experiences. And we live in a community where people are not shy about complaining, especially people that were very concerned about the traffic. And it never materialized. So the good thing is we're sitting here today with the benefit of a month of real-life experience by members of the community. and it's been a very positive experience.
I didn't.
So that's, I just don't want, I think these charts are great, a little hard to understand at times, but at the end of the day, and Lieutenant Carroll, you're there more than anybody. The fact is, the intersection is working better than most people expected, and we're not hearing any complaints.
Right, but it's
So-
temporary,
and-
but
I
it's
hope what
a
we're
temporary
driving
issue.
towards is a version of this that shows what it will look like if we move forward with the proposal to open
Lifetime.
the additional square footage.
Yeah.
I think that's the purpose of this conversation tonight, so.
Right.
Do we have that analysis? Do we have a recommendation from you as to whether we should be allowing the applicant to proceed with the additional square footage that they've come to us requesting?
So I like how he said, I like how he looked at me like that.
I'm not disagreeing that this is great news you're bringing to us. And I understand where we want to go with this data and where we want to go with the next TCO that we're looking at. But I'm just voicing a concern that there is something which is not being addressed in this community, and we hear it all the time, and it has to do with these intersections. And we're doing the traffic studies right now that give us all of the data we need to know to be able to understand that. I'm not suggesting we need to understand it tonight, but I just want to be sure that I put it on the table again, and we'll go from there.
And to add to what Tom's saying, I want to put it on the table again, too. All the analysis we see are incremental with just a little bit of retail, a little bit of retail, a little bit of retail. What happens when the 91 townhouses are built, all the office is leased out, all the residents are living there, the Performing Arts Center is hopping, and this place, nobody has shown us what that looks like yet.
Except I totally agree with you, but I don't think that's why we're sitting here today. I think, unfortunately, we all think traffic is gonna be horrible then, but that was already approved way before any of us, well, not necessarily, but were on board. So I think it's gonna be bad, but the retail was already approved, the townhomes were already approved. If there's anything we can do later on to make it better, we're gonna be looking to you to figure out how to fix some of that.
And I'm suggesting maybe we could just get ahead of it. I mean, you read the numbers, these are all based on numbers that were 6 years ago, 4 years ago, and so forth, and we've gotten new documents and new numbers now that they've been updated and revised, which is great. So I'm just saying, has that new data been put into the model, and all those intersections that may have worked in 2014, are they still gonna work in 2018 with all the new data?
That's a great question.
It's a simple request, and we're not getting it, or at least I'm not seeing it happen.
No,
Well, and I think
that's
there's
fair.
been like a micro-analysis within the point that you're making, which is that, we're looking at the details of the difference between, I can't remember what the two dates were in December, but to the point that Bob Kirkwood just made, we don't have the good fortune yet of having an analysis that includes what happens when the construction picks back up in mid-February. So, I think that that's a critical point for us to be considering as we think about whether or not we're opening additional square footage, is that, while the MPT may be working quite well, as we've all attested to, based on the changes that we've made to date and the improvements that we're looking forward to seeing come online, how is that going to be additionally impacted by the construction picking back up next month?
So my recommendation, after looking at all of the data, doing the analysis, and we broke this down into what I called option A, which is the whole food being in place with Chase, adding in Lifetime Fitness and Pet Value. Lifetime Fitness is 40,000 square feet. Pet Value is 3,000 square feet. It is not significant in the grand scheme
It's not
of.
the square footage, I'm confused, but it's not a square footage issue, it's a usage issue.
Yes, that's true. But even at 3,000 square feet for this type of use, it is not a significant traffic generator. That's really what I'm getting at.
Pet Value,
Pet Value.
yeah.
Lifetime Fitness is, obviously.
And they're gonna have peaks too.
That's
I
right.
mean, let's focus on, let's just also apply some common sense here. I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about Pet Value, but I don't see, a swarm of people, going to Pet Value. I hope nobody from Pet Value is here. But I'm just saying,
All I'm saying is that when we look at this analysis with Lifetime Fitness, it could be with or without Pet Value, that's not the deciding factor, okay? Moving forward with Lifetime Fitness, once we go beyond that point and we go into option 2, where we get into additional square footage of retail. And as far as I knew yesterday, I did not know what that additional, 17,000 square feet would be. So just being, I guess, conservative and just assuming it's shopping center, I am at a point where I can't recommend to the board that we would be able to go beyond Lifetime Fitness and have the MPT plan work at an acceptable level. And this is the Whole Foods with just the Lifetime Fitness in place. We're getting to a point in both the northbound and in the eastbound direction of Roaring Brook Road, specifically in the PM peak hour. And again, this doesn't take into consideration that there might indeed be a peak of the peak. We're getting to a point, especially in the northbound direction, even with our signal timing changes, that we start to see significant amount of delay associated with the northbound and the eastbound approach. And so I would not recommend, unless we, can do additional analysis and that analysis tells me otherwise, to going beyond the Lifetime Fitness and Pet Value, because, and just from, layman's point of view, if the northbound approach had an exclusive left turn lane that was designed for 5 or 6 vehicles, as in the ultimate permanent condition, then obviously this would be a different analysis, and my opinion would be different. But based on what's going to happen, in my opinion, over the next few months, and not having the ability to have that northbound left turn lane exclusively, mainly because if it's only 3 car lengths, in my opinion, it's not worth it from an operational standpoint. And then secondly, if room is needed for the wall construction, we would have to take that left turn bay out. So there's a series of slides that go here that I will certainly have as a PDF so that the board and others can look at it. And again, tomorrow with a more detailed memo with information.
Are you saying that Lifetime Fitness, with the existing MPT plan, knowing that we're going to start construction in February, should be approved?
Lifetime Fitness can be approved based on this MPT plan and the intersection operation.
And that's that,
What-
that's that graphic?
Yes.
As it
So
stands
you're
pre-
saying that level of service D and E and 5 to 6 PM northbound is
And what about
acceptable?
other times?
The other times actually are not as bad. The school peak northbound is okay. Obviously, the school peak in getting to the school and getting back out, these get into the D and E levels of service. And when, again, that's option A. I'm sorry, I have to go the other way.
Lou, is that with the enhanced lighting
Yes.
system that you're putting in?
All of this is with the additional traffic signal timing adjustments. Now, remember, at the new signal, there's really not much in terms of timing adjustments that can be done because it is a smart signal. It's going to dedicate the amount of time based on the competing traffic volumes that are out there. The intersection with 117, there is a certain amount of time that we could play with, but you can't take it from one approach and give it to another if they're both not going to operate well, right? So we looked at, obviously, operating at level service D and E is still an acceptable level service. A level service E is still acceptable. It's when we get into level service F is where it becomes unacceptable. What might be acceptable for me as a traffic engineer might not be acceptable to you as a board member, might not be acceptable to your residents, might not be acceptable to the lieutenant. So that's all relative, right? But what I'm saying is that as we get past the Whole Foods, the Lifetime Fitness operation, and in projecting it outward, I don't see how the operation of the intersection 117 can handle that additional traffic.
So let me ask you a question. given that now you know that you're gonna have a Fidelity Investments in there, which,
Is that
no
in the letter?
disrespect to Fidelity Investments, but I don't know that that's generating a huge amount of traffic, probably less than Pet Value. And I don't know so much about the Northern Westchester with their physical therapy or whatever they're putting in there.
It's like a wellness
But,
center.
or wellness center, so given that you know, forgetting the piece that we don't know what might go in there, but given those two tenants, does that change your, view that those should not be opened as well? I completely, agree that the other portion, which is an unknown tenant, we don't know what it is, could potentially, square footage aside, because as we said, we're really looking more at traffic generation than square footage. You could have a huge store that no one ever goes into versus a small store that's very busy. If it was, I don't know, some kind of incredibly attractive restaurant or something, that may be different.
So if I
But in
may-
terms of, one second, in terms of the Northern Westchester Wellness Center and the Fidelity Investments, does that change your thoughts at all? Because we do know at least what those are, as opposed to
Right.
what you thought before.
And so that 7,000 square feet, based on those uses, they're not that intense, right? Compared to 7,000 square feet of a restaurant that might be there in the PM peak hour, or something else that was a high generator of traffic. Those are not high generators of traffic. I just don't want to be in a position where we're incrementally adding and adding and adding to the point where, at the end, we have something that is, pretty large, and we really took it in piecemeal, and that does not make sense. We do not do it in that way.
So
can I-
I hear that you were basically saying that with the addition of Lifetime Fitness, Pet Value, but Lifetime Fitness to say, we're kind of pushing the outer envelope of what the MPT plan can handle.
I think that with the Lifetime Fitness and the Pet Value, we're at that point where the intersections could still work at an acceptable level of service. It's when we significantly go beyond that point.
Post-February construction you're referring to, or now in its current state?
Now.
No, now, right now.
And what happens, have you done an analysis, which is, what happens to the level of service when we go into construction? And the Lifetime Fitness traffic and how that, like, for example, we're all at like what you call it, CDE or DEs, does it like all go to F?
We have not done a construction level service. I think that the lane widths may get a little tighter, but we're not going to lose a left turn lane because we didn't put it into the MPT plan. So we had some idea of if this is going to continue and we have to take something out, we don't want to put it in to begin with and then have to remove it.
So if I may, I just wanted to add some relevance in real time. So when you all were talking about the fact that we have real numbers and real experiences, and I'm pleased to hear everybody's going through the intersection, they feel it's working, because boy, we worked really hard together to make that work. So what happens? So Lifetime is planning to open at the end of January, subject to your willingness to grant them a TCO. Pet Value will also open at that time. What's going to happen next? So based on our request, we're asking for an additional 14,000 square feet of additional openings, right? 100,000 feet, we have 86,000 square feet open. We have 14,000 square feet. So Fidelity is 5,000 feet. They've applied for their building permit. They don't have it yet. They got to build out their store. So in theory, I believe Fidelity will open, if you let us, before we have the CO. We're about to sign the lease with Northern Westchester. They haven't applied for their building permit because they haven't done their plans. I got a feeling that actually, even though we might have the right to do so on the 100, doesn't get open until after the CO. Nobody else is going to be able to get open. We're talking about a period of time. It's January 15th. We think the paving plant reopens on April 15th. Call it May 1st. That's the window. As of that paving plant reopening and me finishing my obligations, which is the $3.2 million of intersection improvements and the $1.2 million worth of improvements I made at the high school, and the $600,000 that I put in escrow to fix the railroad tracks, so we don't know what to do with yet, we have a CO and we're allowed to open these facilities. I don't have a problem if you want to do traffic studies going forward, but that's what we did for the 15 years together. And those were the intersection improvements and all the things that we've designed with Mazer and everybody else. So as of around May 1st, we're going to meet the conditions of a CO, subject to bill or anything else that's going on. So we're talking about this very limited window, and these additional stores come on in phases. Whole Foods was the one we were all worried about. They're the biggest traffic generator. It worked. Lifetime Fitness is the next. We believe that's going to work, as Lou has just said. But the other tenants that we have signed are de minimis users of traffic. It's Fidelity.
I almost feel like you cannot sit there and like say, oh,
Stan?
this tenant is gonna generate this much, this tenant's gonna generate this much, because what I think it is an aggregate shopping experience. So if you take Millwood, the hamlet of Millwood, with the little Rocky's Deli across the street, a Chase Bank, a liquor store, DeChico's, pharmacy, a dry cleaner, a nail salon, the post office, what you end up having is one-stop convenience.
You mean people walking around? They park, they drive in, and they do all those
They
things.
do all of those
Yeah,
things.
that's how this is supposed to work.
Right, and so what ends up happening is, it's not just, the sum of the parts or the incremental parts, those counts for that store, if it was a standalone store in the middle of a desert, would be very low. But when you start creating critical mass, the counts go up.
Or
So
go
I
down,
kind of,
because the people will be moving on their feet between the stores. They're not
right,
making a
but
separate trip to
more
go
people
to.
will say it's more, I can do more things in one place, so instead of having to make 5 stops, I can make 1.
Maybe.
And so you actually kind of generated incremental traffic as a result of that convenience factor, which is good design. So my feeling is that, you're saying that it's just, X number of square feet, and one of them's gonna be Fidelity, and I think a physical therapy unit or a wellness unit can.
There's no
actually
physical therapy there.
I
generate
think we should
quite a-
keep with reality, just
I
not.
was just trying to give you, rather than the abstract, the specific.
But we
We
don't
do,
know
we
that.
do, well, here's what I'm gonna suggest, Felix, this is what I'm gonna suggest to you. Rather than, listen, you talk about the Chicos, the generator was the Chicos, right? Okay, so it wasn't all those other things. Fidelity is not a big generator, we know that, okay? Nobody's going to Fidelity and then all of a sudden running to the shopping center for Fidelity. I think your ask should be, in my opinion, to get to yes, is Lifetime Fitness, Pet Value, and Fidelity. Northern Westchester is not going to be ready yet, and it's the unknown that's the problem. I agree with what Hal is saying with the unknown, but we know what's going to be there, Fidelity, and that is not a big trip generator. So there's no,
So
in my
all
opinion.
you're potentially eliminating with that comment is whether or not we get Northern Westchester built and opened in their 2,200 feet. So if that's the compromise that makes everyone feel comfortable, fine. Believe it or not, I'm just trying to avoid us doing this over and
The
over.
point is but you're naming it, the point is you're naming it, you're not saying up to 100,000.
Right,
You're
but
naming it,
that-
you're
But I can
saying,
name- I can
we
name
want
all
to
of them.
eliminate the unknown, you want to eliminate the
Blanket request up to
unknown.
100.
Right.
Well, I know the answers to the questions, that's why I was trying to
I
bring
know, but
specificity.
we need to eliminate the unknown. So basically what I'm saying is, again, Lifetime, Pet Value, and Fidelity, and no unknown. There's no unknown in there. These are the stores, and that's it. Because I think you're hearing concern about the unknown.
And I
Right,
think
because
one of
like
the
I
unknowns-
just said, even though it's only an extra certain amount of square feet, we don't know what you want to put in there. It could be a huge traffic generator or nothing.
Well, how about you just simply say no restaurants until
So,
we have the
but
CO?
it could be something else. So
I don't think that's the
I
issue.
would
I-
just assume, because we may need to, if you were putting in, and I can't think of what it would be, but in the extra square feet, if you were putting in something that ended up being a large traffic generator.
Shake Shack.
At that point,
An Apple store.
Shake Shack or an Apple store, well, that's a
This
little
thing, a
small
large
for an Apple
generator.
store,
I'll just tell them no.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
if you were putting in something that was gonna be a large generator of traffic, we as a town board and a planning board, before everything is done in terms of the street, the traffic, would wanna be able to analyze that.
I'm
as
fine.
opposed to a
If that's what
kind
you
of
want to
a
do, I'm
blank
fine.
check.
I'm just trying to avoid, it was so painful to get through that Whole Foods process. This is less painful as we now welcome Lifetime to the property. If you want to limit it to Lifetime, Pet Value, and Fidelity, and that makes everybody feel comfortable, fine. I just wanted to avoid coming back and doing this again between now and the CO because I managed to get Northern Westchester open or something else. Because the tenants are all, they want to open. they still have to get through that process. That was the whole motive.
But I
Whatever you
still
want to
think
do is
that-
fine.
So at what point
Yeah.
are
I
we
agree.
going to have, are we, at any point in this process, are we going to have what Bob Kirkwood had requested, which is an analysis of the construction phase with the incremental traffic? We know we approved Whole Foods, and we know that, and I can't remember the other one right now off the top of my head, but we know we approved basically Whole Foods. At some point, are we going to get a snapshot of what the construction phase is going to mean with and without
Well, we don't
this
even-
additional square footage opening?
We don't have an answer yet as to how long do you think the construction will last?
You know, it's not just a question of the length of time, too, it's the conditions of construction.
Right.
Because how long will you have to be at one lane of traffic?
Right.
I'm thinking in that week before Whole Foods opened, there was a very painful time period
Yeah.
where on 117, it was taking 10, 15 minutes to
Right.
go from a little past Cowden Lane to the intersection at 117 and Marine Brook Road. So I think it's not just a question of how many days or weeks or months that construction is going to last, but what are the details of that construction? How
Right.
long are you going to have one-lane operation?
Exactly. And those are the
You know-
issues, because I think, we're talking up here, I think there may be some changes that we will need in the MPT Phase 2A during that construction. And all we're asking, I think, is we need that homework prepared and given to us by the applicant so that we can look at that. I don't think there's any difference at all in terms of marginal traffic between Pet View and Fidelity. I mean, I think that's an easy one. But I think I think all of us are struggling just to make sure that we're comfortable with even Phase 2 based on the construction that we know is coming down the road. We know it's inevitable. Let's just be comfortable that we know what we're going to do. I'm not suggesting that we hold up the opening of fitness, but I'm suggesting that we may, and this is the only time we can do it, impose additional conditions, if we think it's appropriate with the police, et cetera, for that Phase 2A, for the MPT.
During construction.
During construction, exactly right.
So Bob, I agree with you and Rob and maybe most of us with what Felix proposes, which is definitive tenants that meet whatever threshold we think is appropriate. It sounds like we have those. But I'm still not sure, and I agree with you, Bob, about this business during construction, because none of this reflects that.
Right.
But I'm concerned about what this does reflect, which is the assumption that level of service D and E is acceptable. And we've said that a number of times, but I think it'd be good to refresh our collective memory what that means to somebody going through that intersection at D and at E.
I mean, I don't want to put Bob on the spot here, but you live right there, and what are you seeing? If you want to share that, if you don't, you don't have to.
Wait, I'm sorry, forgive me, I'd like the technical definition of it first.
And then also, to augment Tom's question, I would also like a refresher of the current prior to opening, prior to the MBT plan, levels of service.
Okay.
What's D and what's E? What's
So-
somebody going through that intersection can experience?
Once we get to level service D and E, we're in the 45 to 65 seconds of delay. So we're into that, you're into it at least a minute, and you may actually not get through the intersection on one signal cycle, and that becomes increasingly more often during that peak hour as you get closer to level service E.
And what
Once you
happens
get
at
to
E?
level service F, you're in above 80 seconds of delay, and now you're not making it through on one signal cycle. And what we tried to give you a graphical representation in that northbound direction is basically that is the length of the average queue for that 5 to 6 p.m. And that's average. So at some point during that hour, it could be smaller, and some, it could be longer.
So let me just be sure that we have D and E. You said 45 to 65. Is that from D through E, or is that D?
That's the threshold for level service F is 80 seconds. So you get from 35 to, I think, 50 seconds for level service D. I just have to go back and find out what that is.
So E is
Tell you
up to
exactly.
80 seconds.
That's right.
E is up to 80
Through
seconds.
80, yes.
So 80 seconds is, what is that? It's like a minute and a half. The light cycles here, the green phases here are going to be a minute and a half?
No.
No. So it's pretty certain that folks, and that would be on the average, so it's pretty certain that folks are on the average going to be waiting, not making it through the first green light. And for people who are, for that period of time when it's above average, people are going to be maybe waiting 2 light cycles to go through.
As you get
And I
closer
did
to
some-
E, at the end of the yes.
Right, so that's what I wanted to ask you.
Right.
From a traffic, from a traffic point of view, planning point of view, D and E is acceptable, but I'm not sure that for the community, that level of service is acceptable to people who drive this road every day.
But I would point out, it was like that before. In fact, it was like that before for many more hours. This is talking about 5 to 6 peak hours. When you make these improvements, when somebody sticks $3 million into the road or $1.2 million down by the high school, these are improvements that are there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you know, what sometimes people do is they only focus on that peak hour and that one letter. And I think that does a disservice, because these roads are out there 24 hours a day. And let's not forget the condition before these improvements were made, which was a D and an F at times.
The roads are only useful as roads when people are actually driving them. And yeah, at 3 in the morning, it's level of service A. The point is
Well, not
that
more
most
than
of the
that,
people who, not most of the people, but many of the people who are trying to get through there must be a lot more people trying to get through these intersections during 5 to 6, or we wouldn't have a level of service D and E.
Look,
But
I'm
it
still
still hasn't
confused. I'd like to ask two, I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? No. 2 questions. First, if level D is in the 45 or 50-second range, and to Tom's point, well, the light isn't held for 40 to 50 in probably any direction, so they're likely to be there for at least one cycle of the light for D. For E, you're probably getting closer to 2, and F, you're getting closer to 3, something like that. Now, the math may be different a little bit, but that's what I'm thinking. Is that in the ballpark?
Yes, I think
Okay,
that is reasonable,
All
yes.
right. Well,
The-
okay,
The
it's
longer
a
the
reasonable
queue,
interpretation,
the more
yes.
it will take to get through the intersection, the higher the demand, right? Like the eastbound left turn from Roaring Brook Road has a lot more volume associated with it, and that's why it has a longer queue. So the higher the demand, the longer the queue, the longer it'll take to get through the intersection,
Okay, now-
on average.
Now I have a third question now, but the second question is just a clarification. These traffic counts and these predictions are based on the fully developed site, including housing?
No. Right now, so what we have is, we have real traffic counts with the Whole Foods and the bank in place, and that's real, right, because we counted that. What we're going forward on in option A with the Lifetime Fitness and the Pet Value is a forecast of what that additional traffic above what we have now with the Whole Foods in place, what would that be?
But for the MPT.
For the MPT, with the changes in traffic signal timing that we talked
Okay,
about.
now back to my third question. The current the past situation before anything opened and before any construction started at the intersection, at Roaring Brook and 117, what was the level there? Was it D or C?
At this time of day.
Pardon?
Let's pick a concrete time.
If we go back and we pick a 5 to 6 PM, I think it was level service D in the existing conditions.
Okay, so that's what it would return to.
Right, but now, obviously you added the MPT plan, you made it safer, you added capacity, you changed the signal timing, so you allowed for additional traffic to go through the intersection.
Yes, but the level of service for people who are still experiencing that intersection is back to what it was before. And I don't understand the logic that says, well, it was bad then, we should go back to that. Seems to me that.
Well, the thing is,
Well, I'm sorry, let me finish. Seems to me that one of the options, the obvious options, which may not be palatable to anybody or to most people, is we don't have to issue this TCO. We can wait until these improvements are done. Traffic improvements are done, and when that day arrives, everything will be in place. I don't know whether it's a 6-month delay or a 4-month delay, but it seems to me that's something that we ought to be willing to think about for the sake of, the people who are out there driving the roads. I don't see, well, gee, it was really bad before, so let's go back to that. It doesn't make sense to me.
But if it's, to play devil's advocate, if it's a temporary situation, and we know ultimately the fix is going to be there, and we know there's going to be more traffic too at some point, then why not allow it to move forward? Because there is other ancillary benefits to people who in this community who want to enjoy.
For 4 months, for something that has never been there, it's not like we took Lifetime Fitness away from them. I mean, I'm still stuck on the why we would be wanting to do this. I mean, why not wait? That's all.
Well, just say we could have done that with Whole
understand-
Foods too, right?
What I'd really like to
Yes,
understand
we
is,
could have done
you
with
were
Whole
giving
Foods,
us
but
a
we
didn't,
point
and it
in
worked out
time.
great, and
Giving
everybody's
us a
thrilled.
point in time
Well-
prior to.
Well, it did because those traffic improvements
All of the
worked.
construction that's gonna be
But
done
we're
between
being told
April
that
and
it
June.
won't work for this next TCO.
No, we're not. We're being told it won't
And-
work after.
and
like,
this
level
may
of
very
service
well
to me
go,
is not working.
There's three people talking, so I don't know.
this may very well go to, a chronic F. I just don't know. I mean, the numbers need to be run. There's nothing here that gives me a sense of volume increase that Lifetime Fitness is generating. So there's like kind of, arrows and yellows and greens and so on and so forth, but there's sort of like, we're only looking and making a decision on a sliver in time, which is not gonna reflect the reality.
Did Lifetime Fitness did you share the numbers? Is that part of the equation, the actual number of people who've registered or taken memberships?
As part of this traffic count,
Yeah.
we didn't provide this information. I
No.
believe, did you get it? I imagine some of that was from the Mazer traffic study a few years back.
Would that be helpful in the
And
analysis?
Kurt, well, we have two things, right? One is, we could predict what an average gym would generate in terms of peak hour traffic on average. If we had actual data that we could bounce that off of, then we could say, well, Lifetime Fitness may have more traffic, less traffic, different times of the day, based on actual information. It's always good to have both sets of data, and then obviously we could superimpose that information on the analysis and tell you, here's what we think the analysis would go from what it is right now, because it's with Whole Foods and the bank in operation, and then what it would be with that additional traffic that's going to be added on.
But I think, I keep going back to the point that Bob made because I feel like it's sort of critical. We have the analysis now and the boards can make a determination as to whether or not we're willing to accept a level of service that's a D or E. But what we don't have is whether the additional construction traffic is gonna take it from a D, E to an F. And so I think before we can move forward, that's the critical piece that we're looking
Can I
at.
comment on that? That's why I'm standing up. Just because I asked,
know
talked
you
to
were
John,
read my mind.
because I talked to John Collins, so I thought that, I
thought
thought
you were
that I
just
would add to
stretching.
that. To get some information, we don't have our contractor here, but John is here, and to give you some information with respect to the construction that's part of the discussion. We expect that the stone wall itself is going to take all of 10 days as far as the construction of the stone wall. And when you compare it to the concerns you have from the original construction and some of the problems that we had, you'll recall there were contractors coming from everywhere. They were coming from Verizon, they were coming from all of these various places. We couldn't coordinate it, we couldn't do it, we weren't able to select the times that it was done, and it created a real problem. That's not the case here. This is all us that's doing the work. We can time it, we're going to start it. We expect to have about 10 days for that. So again, that can be done at times of the day that we'd be able to coordinate with the town officials, et cetera. And if we do it over 2 weekends, and during the week, you're talking about 1 week essentially while the school is open, that we would have to be doing the stone wall. In addition to that, there's about a month's worth of work that it has to do with the road itself, where there's going to have to be raising up the road and things of that nature. But it's not work all day long, it's work at various times, there has to be certain pours done, et cetera. I'm not the expert, we can bring the contractor in, but what I am being told is that because it's us that's doing it, we do have to coordinate it also with DOT, that we will be able to do this in a way that, I'm not going to call it seamless, it's not seamless, it's construction, but this is not the additional nightmare that maybe you're thinking about, because you're thinking for 3 months you're going to be doing all this work. That's not what this
Well,
is.
I
So
sort
we'll
of
get you
re-
more information on it, but that's what I just
recall-
heard.
that information
I get it. That's the first I focused
Part
on
of
it.
our original conversation when we were talking about allowing Whole Foods to open, one of the requests that was made, and even though you couldn't put down specific dates, but let's say from this time period to this week, whatever, to whatever, and a projected start date, I thought you were going to lay out the construction schedule with the timing associated for those things to be completed so that we could overlay that construction schedule with the impacts on traffic.
Okay,
I
don't recall that.
Maybe that isn't clear, but I think it would be super smart and helpful to do that now.
We're happy to do it. This is the first we've had the discussion. My memory is that discussion we had to do with the polls and when they were coming down and who we were, and I think we did a fairly good job with that in doing it. And now we have the one more poll that has to come down, and we're doing that again. And we will work with you on this. I think the basic point that Felix is making is, and again, we have an approved condition, okay? And if we weren't here asking for relief with respect to these particular retail tenants, okay, we wouldn't be having this discussion, we would just be going
But I
forward to
think that if
approval.
I think if what we could do is we could take a look at what these things do, then look at the construction phase, and if it, I'm assuming, and, you know, I'm assuming that when something's an F, and you've got a lot of incremental traffic going to a certain location, again, safety gets compromised. So
First
I
thing,
think it's important that we basically have a snapshot, and I understand they want to open up February 1st, but, you know,
Is it possible that we can get this information so we get to Lou and then we have it back for next Tuesday and?
we will try. I don't know if it can be next Tuesday. We're gonna have to go talk to our contractor.
That's the key, I
And
think.
have that discuss, I get it, and we will try to provide it. One comment. Firstly, there is no F up there at the moment, and secondly, when it's F and it's virtual standstill, it isn't a safety issue because nobody's
Well, I
going
think
anywhere. So, no, but in all seriousness, so that the record is clear, I don't think we're talking about a safety issue here. We're talking about a convenience issue, how often and how long it takes you to get through an intersection. I use the Whole Foods. I've been there twice. I get it, I understand it. I used to live right in the area, so for 8 years, and I dropped my kids off around there. I understand what you're talking about, but again, if you take the context of where we are, it's an approval, and what Felix was trying to point out, and I think it's accurate, you're talking about a 3-month period. That's it. We can go forward what we have. You have taken advantage of, and you have the right to talk to us because we're making a request to you, and you're improving things, and that's fine. But we're asking you to give consideration to this. You have real businesses here, people that are working there, people that want to use the place, and frankly, is there going to be some inconvenience? There may be, but in the long run, it's better because you're getting all sorts of things for us, asking for this that you would not have had otherwise. That's just my opinion.
I
There are
agree.
two sides to this 3-month question, though. We go back to you guys. It's 3 months.
Right.
So, wait, 3 months. Why is the argument that we need to be in a position of granting,
Because-
I'm sorry, granting you 3 months of an intersection at a level of service D and E?
Because-
I'm sorry, just a minute. When, in the interest of your business plan, and I understand that there are people in the community who want to use this, but not everybody going through that intersection at levels of service D and E is going to Lifetime Fitness. They're not getting the benefit of this business opening 3 months early. They're suffering the consequences of it.
Okay.
So back to you guys, why don't you wait 3 months?
Because one of the things that, can I just respond?
I'd like to, let me just respond first, because I think it's also, I think what we need to do in fairness is not look at this in a vacuum. When they were here last month, when everybody was, the world was going to collapse, when Whole Foods was going to open, we asked them to do certain things. We asked them to create the path from Cowden. We asked them to create the path from Annandale. We asked them to look at the sight lines on Whippoorwill. We had a lot of asks, and it was also in the context that, granted, our resolution didn't say Lifetime Fitness can open, but it was also in that context. We had Phase 1 and we had Phase 2. Now here they are in Phase 2. And by the way, the community loves Whole Foods, and the community hasn't experienced the traffic, and the community is going to love Lifetime Fitness too. So, yes, He's asking for something, he's done everything we've asked, and as a side benefit, the community is going to love it, because there's a lot of people who are very excited about Lifetime Fitness opening. And the intersection is now working better than it was, and it will perform better than it was after they finish pumping $3 million into it. So that's why we do this, because it's good for the community. And by the way, a month ago, our main focus was safety. All we cared about was safety. Well, it's safe. Okay, and now we're just talking about, yes, maybe there may be some slight delays, and I understand some people live there, but there's always been delays there, and there's a heck of a lot of people who love Whole Foods thanks to what we did, and there's gonna be a whole heck of a lot of people who are gonna love Lifetime Fitness.
No argument.
I actually think to a certain extent, the fact that we took our time and as a board had several meetings in a compressed time frame to really review the MPT plan to make it safer, the recommendations of the board helped make this a success. And so I think, we actually helped them become more successful, because if there was traffic congestion, Whole Foods would not be as successful as it is. So my feeling is now that the same approach that we took in December should be taken now to make sure that we feel thoroughly comfortable and we can make jointly the work together to make this successful. And right now, there is a dearth of information. There's a dearth of information on the clients, on the broader ask. Even if you keep it specific, there's a dearth of information about what's going to happen in the time frame during construction. So I don't think that if you guys, just as you did in December, kind of rallied and provided that information, and in turn we do the same thing, we will have a much more accurate snapshot to make sure that we all feel comfortable and that there is minimum disruption, not just to the tenant, but minimum disruption to the broader community at large.
And let me just add one thing, I'm sorry. It should be noted also that, just like we required police at certain times during the Whole Foods opening, we can require police during the construction. It also should be noted that the school has a break from April 15th to April 19th. So there are factors here that we should take into consideration, and I agree with Hala. We made it better with our conditions, and we made it safer, and we could do the same thing here. But again, the theory was we work together so that it works for the community, it's safe, and it works, and God forbid, it works for the developer too. And Lifetime Fitness is here, who has a lot of people that are unemployed, who want to get to work, and there's a lot of people who join the gym and want to start using it, and these are all things we should consider.
Can you just give us also, while you're talking, just because it's on the same thing, just a quick, just update where we are with that one pole that's still there that
Sure.
needs to be removed?
That's easy, we'll start with that one. We expect that to be done by the end of the month. We're scheduling that, and so we had January 31st on there, but it actually may happen a little bit
Just on
sooner than that.
T-Side?
What's that?
It's just Verizon.
Just right. So we expect that to be out by the end of the month, and actually, that's a condition of this opening. It's
I know.
still on there, so we're not, whatever you decide, it's not happening unless that occurs. To your point on the uncertainty, I think I heard from my client here, he hears you, we didn't necessarily agree with it, but he's willing to live with the Lifetime, the Pet Value, and the Fidelity. So if for those issues that, well, Chase is already open. Chase is already, so those three that are the certain, so you'll know exactly what it is, and we understand the comment, and I think we're already past that issue. I think the bottom line point from my perspective, and again, I understand that, what's in it for you. I think the supervisor said it fairly well. We came here the last time with a plan to open this all up. We have given tremendous amount of gives with respect to this MPT plan because of our tenants, which had to do with extra paths that weren't entitled to, the auditorium work that wanted to be done for the arts, and all of those other things that were part of this. And what I heard when I was here the last time was, we're not sure it's going to work. We're going to allow you to open Whole Foods. We're going to allow you to open Chase Bank. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to have our professionals who are going to take a look at this, and they're going to tell us whether it's working or not. And frankly, we're going to hear from the public on whether it's working or not. Because our ask right at the beginning was not for that. It was for all of the retail. We limited our request and still agreed to all the things that were asked from us because we said we're confident that this is going to work. And frankly, we think we're back here tonight telling you that it did work. And we can improve on this if you like. And I think it makes sense, because the other thing the supervisor said, which is also there, you still have the conditions. So frankly, when you have half of the office that was supposed to be built, 92 townhomes that aren't built, the ability to have police there at the intersections when you need them during the peak hours to make it work, the only thing we haven't done yet is and I shouldn't say the only thing, the thing left to be done, the thing left in the traffic to be done is the left turn lane. The police, to some extent, by being there, already are helping with that situation because they can overrule the lights when they're doing that and make that, and make that work. So there's not much left that we actually have to do, but we will continue to work with you to make it better if that's what, if you have ideas. We will get you the work. We will get you the information on the construction stuff. I just don't have that tonight. I gave
That's
you
fine.
everything that I had.
That's totally fair.
Okay.
Mark, I had a couple quick questions on your letter, just
Yeah,
as progress. Do we have any requests back now to the police department with regard to changing the schedules? Because I think that's mentioned in number 5 in your letter. I don't know if you've requested a reduction, further reduction. I know we've reduced one. You don't
We've
have
asked
to answer
it-
now. I
We've
just want-
only asked for it to be reviewed. It's not within our control, so it's
Okay.
really within the
So
control
that's,
of the
I
police.
guess, an open issue. And there was another one where you were going to, you're supposed to be contacting the property owners, and it says in here in a letter that you will. Have you done it yet?
No, but.
Okay.
We are conducting a feasibility study our engineers did site visits, they've gone through it, they have to draw up a plan. It's not as uncomplicated as it sounds because there's a place where the DOT right-of-way ends and the private property starts. There's a pinch point where there's a wall, and there's also some fencing that's there that may or may not have to be moved. Our engineer is finishing the feasibility study. We have to do that first and see what works. Then we would expect to come to the town very quickly. I'm going to have to talk to council about some of the issues that are going to be arising, such as who owns it, how does it get transferred, who's going to have liability moving forward. We have to do all of that. When that occurs and we have a plan, because we just think it's premature right now to be talking to the neighbors, we need a plan in place and say, this is what we'd like to do, is this acceptable to you? So that's what we're working on. We just, again, we need a little more time to finish that.
How far out do you think that is?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, Andy's got to do his work. I got to meet with it. I don't know. I can tell you this, it's not going to be done by Tuesday. That's for certain. But we are,
Finally have
but the
certainty.
bottom line is, we are working on it. I can tell you, we are diligently working on it,
How
but I don't
about
have.
the bus stop, which was 16, where are you with that?
The bus stop, we've had a site visit from people at the county who have looked at it. They were positive about it, but can't commit to it. I can tell you that I personally spoke to the county executive and the deputy county executive at a dinner about this specific issue. They're aware of it. They know who we're in contact with. That doesn't mean it's happening. I will tell you it's up at the highest level, and it's being given consideration. I can't guarantee where they're going
It
to
was a
wind up
meeting
with that.
yesterday, right? The site visit?
Yeah, the site visit was yesterday, but I spoke to both the county executive, deputy county executive. I told them that this was something that the town wanted very much, et cetera, and they said they would look into it directly. You can have a follow-up conversation if you'd like, but I did have that conversation.
Will you, by next Tuesday, have a plan that says, we can construct this in 10 days for this, and a month overlapping the 10 days, or in addition to, so that there's a timeline, even though you probably can't tell the start time because you have these other annoying things that have to be sorted out so no one gets sued. But can you do that by Tuesday?
You mean,
Talk about the wall.
I apologize, you talking
What's
about
the
the wall
construction
or
of the
about the
wall?
path? The wall.
The paths,
It's always the
Don't
wall.
worry
We're
about
not,
the
we're not
path.
closing down government for the wall, no.
but it's the,
Sorry. But
it'd only be 67%.
Right.
Do you understand my question?
You're building a wall, Felix is paying for it, I get it, I get it.
Got that part. That's good.
No, the answer to your question is, yes, we will,
Have
we
that.
will, no, we will, I understand that we need it, now I have to go back and talk to our contractor as to what's possible or isn't. I expect that we would have it, but I can't
I'm not
swear to you.
looking for an official start and an official end. I'm
Right.
asking for the time
Sequence.
sequence.
I can assure
What
you
it
that
means.
tomorrow morning, we will be on the phone asking for that report by Tuesday.
What
I
it means.
just can't,
Only 8:45.
yeah, no, well, we will do that. Our guys have been
With
working around the
regard to
clock.
the conditions that were set forth in the MPT plan, since Bob was kind of running through the checklist of the things that we'd asked for, when Dave Walsh was in front of us last week, I asked him for an update on the status of the traffic signal and the crosswalk
It's
at
turned on.
117 New Roaringbrook Road.
It's on that cheat sheet. I think they turned it on 2 days ago.
Okay.
The
So that it
crosswalk
has a
thing.
walk-only
Lieutenant
cycle
Carroll, you
where
want
all
to
traffic
on that
is
one?
stopped.
I
so
think
people can
DOT,
cross.
if I'm
Thank
not
you.
mistaken, DOT said you can do it, but if we get complaints, we're gonna shut it off.
Status of the crosswalk.
And that's happened like 2 days ago.
It is operational.
All right, I have a question. And you may be able to answer some of it, and also Lifetime. Do you know how many of your employees are gonna be taking the train to come to work here? The reason I'm asking is because we have received complaints from people, you know this already, Felix, that they're seeing Whole Foods employees having to walk in the dark when it closes down 117 to get to the train station. So there is a shuttle bus that,
They're walking, I thought they were walking to the bus stop at the intersection.
no,
they're
they're
coming
walking
down
down
southbound
117 to
117.
get to the train,
seen people-
which is why
That-
the
I
shuttle
never
bus.
understood that.
Yes,
That's
which is
right.
why the shuttle bus is so important,
further
and to
south.
work with Whole Foods on that, to make sure that it's running when their employees get off for the evening. So I want to make sure, as we're looking at this, that if we're going to add Lifetime in, and if that's an issue as well, that we make sure that something is coordinated as well with Lifetime to buy into the shuttle bus as well, so that we're not seeing even additional people, because no one should be walking on 117 in the day, much less at night, at, 10 or 11 o'clock at night to make it to the train.
Well, let me
Came in
just,
from Minnesota, you gotta let them talk.
Yeah. Ben Alberts, Development Manager for Lifetime. To answer your question, no, we don't know how many people are taking the train. We have about 160 employees, about 80, 85 full-time. So, not sure exactly at this point.
the problem is, I mean, this is not related to, well, it is related, but the problem is the B bus line, I think, stops at 7 o'clock. And that's why some people are walking on 117. I did reach out to Whole Foods. They're concerned about it too, and they are willing to work with us.
Are they gonna do a van, Rob, or are they looking to the shuttle? Because we
They're
never
looking to-
contemplated the shuttle running like at 11 o'clock at night.
Well, we're gonna, if, depending on the people that the businesses that are willing to, buy in. I don't mean from abstract point of view. Then we would extend the hours, so that the Lifetime, like the Whole Foods employees are able to take the shuttle to the train, and the Lifetime employees as well. So that's something that we're gonna talk to Whole Foods about, and they were amenable to that. And,
After the store
and we'll talk to
closes.
Lifetime Fitness as well. But the
And
B
are
bus
they-
line
they
stops
walk
at
out?
7 o'clock, that's
On
the
a given
problem.
day, how many people are
An hour
employed
at
at
that time,
Lifetime?
They don't have a choice, because there's no, some of these people don't have a
On a
choice.
given
No,
day,
I
how many
misunderstood it.
employees
I thought they were, now I'm trying to comprehend
Oh.
people wandering down that road.
But they're doing
Right.
it at 7:30 in the morning.
They're doing it at all times of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
At least you can
my
see 'em.
concern was,
So
since we're being asked now whether we're going to allow Lifetime to open, that we also look at the additional employees and make sure that we take care of that, because I don't want to see more people walking on 117.
So to the question asked is, on a given day, how many employees are there, and how is that staggered, if you
We'll have
know?
about 35 employees at one time as part of the club. It's not exactly shift, but, you may have personal trainers there from 6 a.m. to 2. You may have another group that may come from 2 to 10. So it's not set where everybody comes and leaves at the same time.
But some people will. I mean, the
So
club
we'll-
has a closing hour, so
we'll
at
catch up
some
with
point.
Alex, who's the store
you're gonna have
manager at Whole Foods, and we're sorting out the shuttle stuff, but sorry, it seems to me that they need to bear some responsibility for transporting
agree.
their employees to the train station.
Right, we agree, but I want to make sure
There's so much
we're
I
looking
can
at
do,
this.
although I'm sure you haven't figured that out yet.
Not only
No,
that,
no,
there's
we
been-
agree with you. I
there's been
agree.
truck traffic too, I know there's been some complaints, but Bob, you wanted to say something, is that right?
I want to speak just to a matter of safety at the intersection of 117. So my concern, my name is Robert Lewis. I live at the intersection of 117 and Roaring Brook Road. Right now, there is an ice condition on the roadway. It's about 2 inches thick, 10 feet wide, and about 40 feet long. It hasn't gone away since it last rained, which was about 10 days ago. The reason that it's there is that the drainage in the intersection was modified for the MPT plan. There's a catch basin that should have been receiving water and dumping it into the ditch on 117 adjacent to my property. That ditch was filled in so that the pipe that comes from the catch basin can no longer function. So I would hope that some people here could put their heads together and figure out how to get rid of that ice. There's no excuse why there would be 2 inches of ice right now Thank you.
It's the first I'm hearing
Yeah,
about it.
that's true.
Bob, I get a lot of emails from people about icy conditions, and this is the first I'm hearing about it, so, you know.
Think
it's-
about,
No, it's there.
No, I don't doubt it's there,
It's
but
wide.
you gotta tell it, people
Yeah,
gotta tell us
it's
these
wide.
things.
so
too.
where,
And
so,
Lou, maybe you
we're leaving-
can touch base with Bob, just to make sure that,
It's over here. What's important?
Here's his placard.
But I have a question. So it was a ditch, and now the ditch is filled in, but nobody put a pipe in it?
Just, I don't think any of us, do you, Andy, I'm looking at you, usually have the answer to everything.
They'll figure it out.
So,
Curious.
clearly, well, first of all, we're not allowed to work, right? We have that condition, but if John Aslan, he's still there, I'm sure he can go fix
I
this.
think there's an exigent circumstance you could work.
Right, but I'll ask John how to fix it, and I'll send Rob an email, and and I'll copy Bob Lewis, and we'll figure out what the
and
heck's
I will
going on, because I don't know.
Bob Cioli, too.
This is the first I've heard of it, so
Town engineer.
State.
it'll be addressed.
There's a resident engineer out there too as well.
Oh,
Mike McBride.
All right, so maybe we should ask, you guys know more than I do.
I'll
So
contact Mike
who
McBride
can
as
fix it? Yeah, all right.
We'll get it fixed. I want to introduce, just like I introduced Nicole a month ago, who's the president of Whole Foods. Now, I'm going to introduce Mike Spiegel, who's the general manager of Whole Foods. I'm sorry, of Lifetime Fitness. Mike will be the guy who you'll see at the club and running the club. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
In our own bumpy way.
What?
He's been on Chapel Moms, and he's been part of the community for months.
Silent
So,
observer.
exactly.
Gotta be careful on Chapel Mom.
Right. And he's still here. He's still here. So,
Okay, Lou.
Good, so we'll see that additional work, and are we done here?
so we have to set the public hearing for the, today is the 15th to 22nd. So, you have a motion? Well, I guess we'll go first with the motion.
Go ahead, sure.
Motion to set the public hearing for January 22nd, 2019.
No, it's 22nd.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bob, you have two prongs. One is to set a special meeting for January 22nd, and then set a public hearing for the 22nd.
Can we do it as one resolution, or you want two?
You can do that.
Is there a motion to establish a special meeting next week on the 22nd and open the public hearing on the 22nd on this TCO?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So we're set on that, and we're done for now. Les, do you want to do your thing now? Will you clear us out, or go next door, or what?
Yes, we can do.
Gonna go next door.
Motion for advice of council.